Magnus Carlsen shows us the power of pawns in this game. This is the Aimchess final match in which round 4 is being played, and Magnus is playing with the black pieces, and Wesely is playing with the white pieces now. And this is the English opening, and the Anglo Indian defense is now being played. And c5 is played by Magnus, and d4 is offered in exchange of that, and creating this attacking pawn structure in the center of the board. And a6 is played, preventing the knight from coming here. And c into d5 is played by Wesely, and the pawn takes backs the pawn, and then the pawn push of g3 with the intent of placing your bishop to g2 is played by Wesely. And instead of going for the pawn exchange, Magnus immediately places his pawn to c4, which actually becomes very crucial in the game. So this pawn structure is what determine the games later on. So bishop go to g2, and Magnus places his bishop to b4, pinning the knight. And immediately Wesley castles on the king side, and Magnus does the same. So the knight jumps to e5 using the pawn as an outpost, and knight in the center of the board, and the bishop goes to d2, supporting the knight there, and knight jumps to c6, attacking the knight. So a3 is played to push the bishop away, and the bishop goes back to a5, and b4 is again played, and en passant is done by Magnus. And now the knight takes the knight, and the pawn takes the knight back, basically. And after that, Wesley takes that en passant pawn, and Magnus plays h5, which becomes very crucial later in the game. And queen goes to c2 along this open diagonal on the board, and h4, Magnus continues pushing his the pawn that he pushed earlier to h4, and rook goes to c1 in this move, creating this battery on this big backward pawn of Magnus, basically. So and now Magnus continues to push that and do the h3 pawn, basically. And this poses the, because there is the support of the bishop, this bishop never moved, but it provided support to this pawn. So this square is now under control of Magnus. If the queen managed to come into this diagonal, in this open diagonal, then once the bishop slides square the bishop, then it's game over for Wesely. So immediately the bishop goes to g4, trying to get control of this square so that the queen can come over there later on. So Wesely retrieves his knight to b1 with the intent of it also create an attack on the bishop here, and when the bishop moves here, he intends to bring the knight here, controlling these two squares. So the Magnus brings his bishop back to b6, and Wesley brings his bishop to b4 in a better square, which also allows this knight to come over here. So Magnus realizes this and pushes his knight to e4, looking for an exchange of knights. But immediately Wesley go exchanges his bishop, which was protecting this square, for that knight, so that and the rook takes back the bishop. Immediately Wesley places his knight to d2. They're getting control of both these squares for Wesley, uh, which prevents the queen from going there and creating a checkmate or checkmate threat. And the queen goes to d3, and after that the queen to f6 move is played. Now the idea is to bring the queen here and to create a checkmate opportunity, but because of the knight here, you cannot do that yet, basically. So Wesley retrieves his queen to f1, protecting this square over here in case this knight get exchanged or attacked, because that's all what important now. And e8 is played, rook to e8 is played, and after that rook a to b1 is played by Wesley, and Magnus brings his rook to b8 now, bringing back the rook to this square. And now this, once this bishop is under attack, the bishop goes to a5, attacking this knight again, basically, because once this knight is gone, you can bring your queen into the game, and the bishop goes to b4, covering that attack. And again the bishop goes to c7, and that c3 move is, bishop to c3 move is played by Wesley, protecting this knight and protecting the further attacks here, basically. So the pawn push of a5 is played, and f3 is played, attacking the bishop, trying to push the bishop away, and the bishop goes to f5, and the pawn, Wesley continues pushing his pawn to e4, and the bishop again retreats to e6, and then again pawn push to e5, pushing away the queen to e7, and the rook goes to a1, which is and c5 is played by Magnus. So the queen goes to f2 and c4 is played. Now this pawn structure forms again. The same pawn structure was in the beginning of the game, and Magnus was able to uh, reproduce that pawn structure, which determined. So this pawn do not have any obstruction from other pawns, preventing it from capturing, getting exposed to capturing, and it can march all the way down the board, and it becomes crucial in the game. So g4 is played, and f6 is now played by Magnus, which also becomes very crucial in the game's context. And king goes to h1, which is shown as an inaccuracy. Queen to h4 was suggested, but king to h1 was played, and this allows Magnus to exchange the pawns. And after that, which basically means that these two pawns now can march down the board, which actually happens. And now the bishop goes to b6, attacking the queen, and the queen attack is now blocked by the bishop to d4, and the bishop gets exchanged, and the queen comes into d4, preventing this pawn from pushing in, and queen to a7 is played. And once the queen exchange happens, now basically the pawn push happens, the d4. Now Magnus literally, by this pawn push of d4, Magnus was he was offering this pawn for free to Wesely, because he have already done the calculation of how the game goes. So that pawn was taken, and immediately the knight is now pinned, because he cannot move. If you move the knight, your rook will be taken, and then only two squares that it could protect, the knight could protect the rook, was is taken by both of them, one by Magnus pawn, by your, another by your own pawn, and there is no other in between move to play. So the rook comes in to c1, protecting the knight, which is shown as an inaccuracy, and which decides the match as well, because this allows Magnus to push d3, attacking the rook. And once c3 is played, Magnus goes and take the knight with his rook. So, and Wesely takes the rook back, and after the bishop captures, this rook captures. So Magnus just gave away one piece for this pawn push, and after that Magnus plays d2, and there is no way this rook can come down and prevent this pawn, attack this pawn. So it had to go to d4, attacking the pawn over here, which allows Magnus to play c7. Now you can take this pawn, but it causes this check, and because of this deadly pawn which Magnus pushed earlier in the game, or which is present over here, the king cannot escape from this check basically, and it's literally game over. And after the rook blocks the check happens again, and it's checkmate. So this pawn push earlier from Magnus, along with the pawn push on the center of the board, decided the game, and Magnus gave away uh, his advantage. He gave a piece to get into this position. So, and he also played this game with 98% accuracy with 770 pound, and that's Magnus, one of the the greatest all-time player. He's considered as the Mozart of chess basically. So thanks very much for watching. We'll be back with more such videos.